Hello, everybody. A very warm welcome to our webinar on Brazil's digital ECA. I'm Olaf. I'll only be here briefly to introduce our amazing speakers today, as well as doing some housekeeping rules. Two housekeeping rules, basically. First one is you might have seen this, you are muted. However, it brings us to the second housekeeping rule. That does not mean that we don't want your questions. As a matter of fact, we would love to hear your questions. So throughout the webinar, feel free to drop your questions in the question panel. And we will try to either answer them when they come up, or at the end, we also have time for a Q&A where we will then answer your questions there. So we'll definitely make sure we get all your questions answered. With
I was
that,
trying
we
to
will
pull up the
wait for,
Q&A. Give me one second.
with that, we'll wait for 1 minute for Joe to put on the screen again, which is a nice way to introduce our first speaker, Joe Newman from KID. And he will be joined by Larissa Galimberti from Pinheiro Neto. So they will be taking you through the wonderful Brazil's digital ECA. They will start a bit with the history and how we came to it. They will then talk about some of the key aspects. And then most importantly, they will also address what that actually means for you. And now that we have our screen back, I will give the floor to Joe and Larissa.
Awesome. Everything working there? Sorry for that little technical hiccup. All good. Just trying to make sure I get the Q&A. I don't know if I can see it on my screen, Olav, but if you just want to pass them either in the chat or to us separately, I'll find a way to answer them. So anyway, thank you guys very much for being here. Again, my name is Joe Newman. I'm a senior legal counsel at KID. I'm sure I know many of you on the call already, but my background is in the games industry. I worked in-house at Electronic Arts and Ubisoft, and then outside counsel for a number of years, working for a number of companies in the games, social media, tech, kids space. I am not a Brazilian lawyer. I am based in California, but I'm very honored and we're very privileged to have with us Larissa Galimberti. Hopefully I got that okay, pronounced that all right. I'll let you introduce yourself. Thank you.
Okay, first, thank you very much for the invite, and thank you very much for who is here with us for this chat on the new regulation of the Brazilian law. So I'm Larissa Galimberti. I'm partner of the law firm Pinheiro Neto Advogados. My practice is focused on what we call technology practice. It involves data protection, IP, all kinds of IP in general, and AI now, and any regulation related to technology, games, platforms, e-commerce, marketplace. So it's very nice to be here and to present here and discuss a little bit about the very recent regulation in Brazil.
Awesome. Okay, well, we've got a bunch to cover, so we'll just jump right into it with a little bit of background on Brazil itself. So again, assuming you have no experience with Brazil as a market, it is actually quite one. It's the third largest gamer presence in the world. Again, it's behind China and the U.S. and actually has more players than Japan, which has 73 million. And $2.6 billion in annual revenue. So the games industry in particular in Brazil is big, but there's also, a tremendous number of users in social media and tech and online in general. Because of the large gamer presence, there is specific legislation that affects the games industry in Brazil. For example, there's the legal framework for games, which has already quite a few requirements that are important, like parental consent for in-game purchases. There's also the Cananda resolution, Consumer Defense Code, and then the ECA non-digital version, which is what the ECA digital is expanding upon. So Brazil, again, is known for class action consumer protection litigation. It's a very active jurisdiction in terms of litigation. When I was in-house at EA, there was numerous Brazilian lawsuits that we were dealing with. Yeah, it's a very active and thriving industry and economy, and there's a big consumer protection emphasis. Anything you want to add?
Yeah. In the end, is because consumer protection in Brazil is very strong. So when we talk about games or apps or anything like that, in general, the consumer rules could apply depending on the service. And the other thing is that it's not expensive to litigate in Brazil. So this is the reason there are lots of individuals and also the class actions in Brazil.
Got it. So, you can tell me if this is too reductive, but in my experience, a lot of what Brazil's regulatory approach, they're kind of what I would call fast followers. They're not necessarily the ones who are creating new laws, but they will import them from other jurisdictions and put their own spin on them. So, a famous example is the LGPD, which was kind of modeled after the European GDPR. There are also sort of Brazilian versions of the DSA, DMA, etc. Often, what we will see is that Brazil will do their own version of it, and it will in many ways be stronger or more protective because they will see how the rest of the world is approaching these issues. And then oftentimes, you will see kind of a stronger and more refined version of these other laws.
And when it comes to technology, Joy, you're right. We have been inspired by the European regulation. So the example, the most important example here is the data protection law. It was really inspired in the European system, although we have our particularities of the law, but also, for instance, for AI, the artificial intelligence, we do not have a regulation yet, but we have a bill of law really advanced. It was already approved in the Senate, now is under the House of Representatives in discussion, in public discussions there. And it was also inspired by the European system. However, again, it has its own particularities of Brazilian system. This, I would say that is simpler than the European one, but also inspired by the European regulation.
Awesome. So I think without further ado, let's get into the ECA Digital itself. Let's start. Larissa, I'd love to give it. You had such a great insight on the passage of this law and the history behind it. I'd love to talk about how this came to be and how did we get here.
Yeah, when we first talked was like interesting because I don't know if everybody knows how was the procedure of the approval of this new regulation that will apply to children and adolescents online. Because it was not a new bill of law, right? It was in 2022, it was presented in the Senate, so a couple of years ago, right? And it was like slowly going by approvals, but suddenly what happened is that these influencers, Felca, decided to produce a video about the exploration of kids online. And it's about 1 hour video. And in a couple of hours and days, more than 50 million people in Brazil has watched the video. And the video had such an impact in Brazil because one of, and who has watched that, or if you're going to watch, you see in the first part of the video, he talks a little bit about another influencer in Brazil, and he was discussing how this influencer was exploring kids online. And then this guy went to jail. So after the video came in the platform. So it was such an impact in all the population, in the Congress, and then the Congress was pressured to do something, right? So then it was approved, the law was approved in September, and just for you to have this notion of time, the video came up August, in the beginning of August. So it was like 1 month for the approval, and the bill of law was since 2022, right, in the Congress to be approved. So it was like pressure from the society, from the government to have this law. But on the other hand, as we're going to see, it's not super easy to read this law. It's not super easy to interpret all the the provisions of the law. We are really in the beginning to study and interpret the law. So this is what we are going to discuss today, right?
Yeah, it's very common, and we're seeing this in all around the world. Is like, oh wow, we got to do something. We got to do something really fast, and so they'll fast track something in a couple of weeks, really, just to get this done, and then it'll be filled with sweeping obligations and things that we need to do. And in the ECA Digital's case, it was actually the effective date was moved up, right? So it's March 18th, 2026 is sooner than was a lot of people were anticipating,
Yeah,
because they really want to get
because
people doing this quick.
yeah, because in the beginning, Joey, it was 1 year to come to force. And then we had this, what we call in Brazil, provision measure that changed it to be 6 months. So it was changed in the end in order to have this law in effective in 6 months. And we have a decree to regulate this law. And decree provided that the National Data Protection Authority, that is the one responsible in Brazil, in charge in Brazil for personal data processing regulation, it was chosen to be the authority responsible to enforce this new law and also to regulate anything about the law, because as we can discuss a little bit, some provisions of the law delegate to this authority to regulate further.
Yeah. And speaking from the perspective of a US lawyer, and particularly one in California, whenever you create a new enforcement body, so like the California Privacy Protection Agency, and you give them enforcement powers, they're going to use them. And they're going to be very, they want to make a difference, and that's what they're there. So we should definitely expect a high level of enforcement of this. We know that the ANPD's priorities are social media and games, but again, what we often see in the space is, the first cases or two will be really easy ones, and then they'll kind of go after harder ones as they go. So I think this is something that affects pretty much everybody online who has a presence in Brazil. So let's, again, now that we know a little bit of the history behind this law, and we know that it was thrown together fairly quickly, let's try and synthesize and distill into light and figure out what is it that we actually have to worry about. So I think the first point that we want to mention is just the broad scope of this law and how much it applies to almost everybody. Listener, you want to take this point?
Yeah. And just, I want to add something that we are discussing about enforcement before I come to the definition of the law. And I don't know if everyone that is online knows that the Data Protection Authority in Brazil now became a regulatory agency in Brazil. So it received a budget for that. It's more important now. So the professions, the staff there will have a career within the authority there, the body there. So probably we're going to see more enforcement there. So it's important because there is a big change of the authority in terms of power and in terms of budget in Brazil. So, and just to let you know that what happened is that the Data Protection Authority started already to go online and to give speech about this new law. So for sure, they will put their hands on this regulation and enforcement in the near future. So what is this law about, right? So the application of the law is broad because it will apply to any product, we say technology product, that is directly to children of adolescents or is likely to be accessed by them. So this is a broad concept, right? Because you can design your product to not be, I would say, to not target children or to not target teenagers. However, if they can access that, if they can be attracted to this app, for instance, or to this product, the law will apply, right? So it's a broad concept. I would say that mostly everything that is online, products and service, will be subject to this law and will have to comply, because in the end, if you do not prevent adolescent or children to be online in that specific app, you are providing access to them, so the law will apply. So it's the first thing. I think the second one we should talk a little bit is, what is the concept of children and adolescent? So children in Brazil is between 0 and 12 years old, incomplete, and adolescent is between 12 and 18 years old, incomplete. So you are underage when you are 18 years, 0 to 18 years, okay? So this is the concept, and it is the concept that we're going to discuss here because of parental consent, because of age verification. So is what we have to know, because it's a little bit different from other countries, because other countries established, for instance, that to go social media could be 13, 14, right? So we have this division about children and adolescents here. And maybe one thing that we should talk a little bit is that it's very recent. So we are going to discuss some conceptions of the law, obligations, but then we'll have to follow the Data Protection Authority interpretation of them, okay?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, to your point, this likely to be accessed by children. Again, in my line of work, we've often had companies say, "Oh, well, you know, we're not directed to children. We don't want children, therefore we don't have to comply." You know, when we see language like this, that's likely to be accessed, that pretty much is the entire games industry, entire social media industry. I mean, yeah, even if your game is extremely violent, that's almost more likely that you know, teenagers are going to want to access it. So the way we, again, to your point, this is all very new, and there will be more guidance, but we did want to at least break this down into three categories. You know, affirmative obligations, prohibitions, things you cannot do, and then this additional category of like things that you need to build with respect to parents. So we'll go through each one. Just want to give some structure to it. And I saw that we had a question specifically about age assurance, and that is exactly where we're going. So age and identity verification. So this is an example of an obligation. This is not new. There have been age and identity verification obligations around the world. We've already seen this happen in the UK with the Online Safety Act. We'll be seeing a much larger rollout of age verification and age assurance in Australia later this year. And in many ways, the ECA Digital combines those two laws because it applies both to you know, issues where there is adult content that needs age verification before you can access, and then also specifically for social media accounts and social media account creation. So let's kind of break this down. I think we might have a bunch of questions on this because this is very new. The idea of getting age assurance in the games context is not something that has been done before, and it's still something that we're seeing play out. So let's talk about who this applies to, where does it happen in the flow, and then what methods are permitted. So we'll kind of try and answer those three questions.
Yeah, and Joy, here, the first thing to say is that when you read the law, it's not super specific to say who needs age verification, and you have a list of the type of apps or, you know, websites. You do not have that. You have some provisions, you know, sparse in the law, and you have to get the provisions and interpret that. So first thing is app stores and operating systems. So there is a specific obligation to them that they must proceed with age, the inference of age, and then they must send age signals to the apps. So the law provides that the app stores and operating systems, they have to provide an API in order to send the age signals to the apps. So this is the first obligation. And also the app stores, they have to implement, and then we can discuss later about parental consent, but they have to implement some controls for download of apps for children and adolescents there. So this is first thing about app stores and operating systems. Then you have a second bucket, that is the app that is inappropriate or is improper, or there is some prohibited content to underage. So there is an obligation in the law that say you should prevent the access by children and adolescents. But then you have a paragraph there say, hey, if you are a service of a product that provides this type of content, you have to have this age verification in each access. So one of the questions could be, oh, can I rely on the App Store sign-offs or not? So I would say that we should be more conservative here and to have your own verification, right? Because there is a specific provision to say, hey, in each access, you have to have the age verification.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to clarify some questions that we got, yes, if an app is available in Brazil through app stores targeting Brazilian users, even if you don't have a formal legal entity or representative in the country, you're still subject to the law.
Yeah.
And also, do we need to age assure minors? Yes, so this is a requirement for everybody. So at the point that you're going to have access to adult content, which again, I want to emphasize includes user-generated content. So even if it's an app that doesn't advertise that this is adult content, if you have free-form communication features between users, then there is potential risk there, and there does need to be age assurance or verification happening. And yeah, to just emphasize again the last point you made, Larissa, about like should we just rely on App Store signals? One thing that we've learned firsthand actually over the last decade in the games industry is how difficult it is from a practical perspective if you're solely relying on an external age signal. Because if you have a cross-platform experience, then you have an immediate problem with conflicting signals across those platforms. So this happened constantly at EA, where we would have a user who, had a single EA account, but they played games on, their phone, and then Apple gave us an age signal, and they played games on their console, and Microsoft and Sony gave us a different age signal, and then they maybe connected to their Facebook account. And so we had all these different age signals, and it created a real problem. And that's why, again, our practical recommendation here is just get your own, do your own age assurance and get your own more reliable signal.
Yeah, and Joy, because in Brazil, this new law has different obligations for different age. So there is specific question about that. So what is the youngest age that this applies for age assurance? So in the end, children is from 0 to 12, and then teenagers from 12 to 18, but there are specific obligations there. So the third bucket that we are discussing, social media service, there is a specific obligation that if the user is under 16 years old, the account has to be associated to the parents or guardian's account. So in the end, you really need to know exactly the age, right? Because it's under 16, the account should be related. And then you have other obligations, other features here that brings obligations to know the age because of parental consent or parental supervision. So for instance, if you have communication inside the platform, as a default, this is forbidden. Only the parents or guardian can allow that in the platform. So first thing. However, if you are going to allow, for instance, your kid to communicate inside the platform, inside the game, you could allow. However, the platform should be responsible to indicate when is an adult. So when your kid is talking or communicating with adult. So let's say that is a game and we allowed communication, but as default, you should not allow. the parents go there, authorize the content and the communication. However, you have to have in all the profiles of adult an indication that is adult, so you know that your kid is talking or playing with adult on the other side. So in many specific case, you need the control of the parents or guardian there. So I answered that question that someone made here. We are going to talk about loot box, okay? There is a specific question.
Totally. Totally. And yes, this is similar to the Texas law in some degree in that, you know, the app stores are going to do verification and they are going to send those signals. But again, as Larissa is saying, we don't want to solely rely on those signals because you still have to do your own age verification at the point of mature content. All right, I want to make sure that we keep the time. I love all of the great questions that are coming in. I do want to talk about what I think is most salient, because how do we actually do this age assurance? Because this is, you know, I think in some ways the $1,000,000 question. Like, can you rely on self-declaration, I am over 18, and we have clear guidance that now says no. So what are the methods available to do age assurance? You can see on the left, there was actually guidance that was released really recently. It was last week, actually, and talking about what the viable age assurance methods are. The good news is that there is some flexibility here. There's a lot of options that you can use, from age inference to age estimation to age verification. They want to have a wide variety, but again, also with the idea of proportionality. And again, this is following very much in line with the EU and the UK guidance on this. Making sure that the information that you are collecting in order to do the age verification process is proportional and privacy preserving compared to the risks associated with the service. So in one circumstance, you might want to do a credit card scan. In one circumstance, you might be okay doing a facial age estimation, you know, like on device, where it's looking at your face to see if you're old enough. There can be a wide variety: email inference, digital ID services, ID scans, banking data, behavioral inferences. Again, there's a whole bunch of options, and they are actually very big on giving multiple options and having a sort of waterfall approach where if the user doesn't want to do one, they can escalate to doing a different one. There was one important note in this guidance that I really wanted to emphasize, which is an emphasis on cryptographic or double-blind tokens. Again, one thing that we are likely to see in the market is people are going to get sick of having to verify themselves over and over, and having to do it for every service that they do, sometimes multiple times, as Larissa was saying, you know, every time that they want to access adult content. So having a proof of age that can be stored in a token and reused, you know, we're very, you know, the regulators are very big on that approach, and we think that that's also, you know, the way things are going. All right, I want to look at some of these questions, and then I want to make sure we don't get.
Yeah, and while you take a look to the questions, just to clarify, we can have a future regulation on the mechanism. Up to this moment, we do not have. The law does not provide exactly the mechanism, just say, hey, age verification, or infer age in some specific provisions. However, the Data Protection Authority has issued these guidance that is just like really guidelines. They are not binding, they are recommendation, they are interpretation. So as you can see, they say, oh, there is changing as we evolve, technology evolves, the method of verifying age is also changing. So is guidance. So we can take a look and choose whatever you prefer. And for sure, we are accountable for that, right? So we are accountable for what we are going to choose. However, there is one discussion that is not clear in the law, that is not clear in these guidelines, that is how you associate the kids with the parents or the guardians in Brazil. So it's not clear how we are going to do that, how the authority is going to enforce that, because sometimes you need the guardians and the parents in order to download the website or app, or in order to be able to have access to, for instance, communications, transactions, purchase. So it's something that probably we're going to see in the near future.
Cool. All right, let's do some rapid fire answers. Some of this stuff we're going to have to save until later when we hit it. But okay, so real rapid fire. To clarify, if they enter a birth date that is under 16, do we need to verify that they're under 16, or can we just go straight to a verification flow? Good question. No, if they say I'm a kid, you can take them at their word and just get the parent involved and have the parent verify the information.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then there's a question on extraterritorial compliance, pointing out the fact that 4chan has been trying to get an injunction in the US to stop the Online Safety Act in the UK. Most of these laws around the world have extraterritorial application. They have to, right? Because that's the only way that they can be meaningful and protect, Brazilian citizens. Again, I don't want to, speculate on terms of, pending litigation, but generally speaking, regulators have the ability to fine and, go after companies that are hurting their citizens. And so, yeah, I don't know. Do
And
you have
Joey,
anything to add on that?
yeah, and there is one specific provision in this new law that if you are going to direct this product or service to children and teenagers in Brazil, or permit the access, you need a legal representative in Brazil. And the whole of the legal representative in Brazil is to receive notification or service order from the courts. So this is a specific for enforce the law, right? So this is obligation. So let's say that you launch a game, you decide to target the Brazilians, and then you make it accessible to the Brazilians, to children, teenagers, whatever, then you need to appoint a legal representative in Brazil. So a question could be, do I need a subsidiary in Brazil? Up to this moment, I would say no. There are discussions before the Supreme Court in Brazil. There is a specific regulation there, but a decision there to be issued. But for this specific law, you do not need a subsidiary, but the law will apply to foreign company, but you need a legal representative. How do you do that in Brazil? There are specific offices, I would say, paralegal offices, for instance, that they can be appointed as a legal representative. So we have many clients that they do not have like subsidiaries in Brazil, but they have a legal representative. So then you'll be reached out by the authority through the legal representatives, okay?
Yep. Yeah, the legal representative is a great point. Okay, I'm seeing we're getting a lot of questions, so I want to keep us on time. I know maybe we can go a little bit over, but some of these questions we will get to later in the presentation, I promise. So let's move forward to loot boxes because I know we had a lot of questions on those. So this is one of the prohibitions of the law, and this is relatively straightforward, and it just loot boxes are prohibited. Paid loot boxes that appeal in games that appeal to children and adolescents. So where is the wiggle room here? Like where is the sort of gray area here? And I think it comes down to how they're defining loot boxes and how they are essentially, is it possible still to sell loot boxes to adults under this law?
Yeah, and the concept is very clear in the law. That is the paid loot box. So there is this specific definition in the law about what is loot box. And it's pretty clear that the prohibition will apply to the paid one. So this is important to mention, right? I have here the concept of loot box. So the definition is a feature in certain electronic games that allows players to purchase upon payment virtual items, random advantage, without prior knowledge of their content, guarantee of their actual utility. So this is the concept of loot box in Brazil.
Yep. And I think one of the things that I seized on there was the not aware of the contents beforehand. So we have a screenshot here of these, they were called sort of transparent llamas in Fortnite, which was a really interesting idea to kind of help manage the loot box risk, because you can actually see exactly what items are contained within this llama. And it's transparent. The contents of it change every day. And so there's still this element of chance involved, but there's no surprise. Once you pay for the llama, you know exactly what it is you're getting. And that is a way that some companies have said, well, this is no longer a loot box because there isn't this element of surprise. You know exactly what you're getting, even if it is randomized. The other question here is, so free or unlockable loot boxes, if you're not paying for it, it's not covered under the law, so you could still have potentially unlockable rewards or randomized rewards. And then there's still the question of, do we think that this is okay to still sell to adults? And I know you and I talked about that a bit, about whether or not we think you could still potentially gate off loot boxes and have them sold to people who are over 18 in a otherwise child-directed game.
Yeah, you just have to be careful again because there are other regulations that could apply. So gambling regulation, free distribution of prizes. So you just have to be careful about that, right? And the consumer protection laws. And one thing that we should mention is that there is a specific for kids, for underage, there is a specific obligation here that is the limitation of features that could extend the use of the product for children and adolescents, such as, then the law gives some examples: automatic media playback, keywords linked to the usage time, notification, and other ways that may result in excessive use of the product or the app. So in the end, just make sure that you do not use this feature in order, even if it's not paid, in order to extend the use in artificial way. Just be careful because of these provision in the law.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good call out. Yeah, I think the other clear prohibition here is with respect to profiling and targeted advertising. This is actually probably not that surprising because we've had a very similar approach in the EU with the Digital Services Act, Digital Markets Act, and in a lot of US states at the state level, we're seeing a lot of just flat bans. Again, this is important because this isn't a parental consent requirement, it's just a ban. So even if a parent says it's okay, it doesn't matter. It's just you can't be doing profiling or targeted advertising. So we've seen a lot of buzz in the ad-supported market worrying about these sorts of laws. And again, it's something that we're actively thinking about and looking at, but it's one thing that we have seen as a sort of practical response to this is an emphasis on sort of smart contextual ads that don't require the creation of a profile, or any sort of behavior across sites or services. Particularly for kids, we've still seen that contextual ads can be quite effective. If they're just based off of the content and the context of where the ad is placed. Anyway, that's a topic for a whole other webinar, so we'll keep it moving.
And Joey, even if it's personalized, I would say content is not advertising. Personalized content to direct a personalized content, then this should be subject to parental supervision. So in the tool that we are going to discuss a little bit, is one of a specific topic of the supervision of the parents.
Yeah, that's a great segue. So let's go into that. And I promise we will get to more of these questions soon. So please keep them coming.
Yeah.
This is great. Great to see so much, interest in this. Yeah. So the final sort of category is just the emphasis on giving rights and controls to the parent. So parental supervision or parental influence tools that give a whole slew of abilities to parents to manage their child's experience, whether that comes down to privacy settings, restrictions of purchases, communication features, time limits, so-called addictive features, and just controlling access to all that. Larissa, you want to add to this? I know we're getting a bunch of questions.
Yeah, because usually when we talk about parental supervision, we think a lot about games and social media. But as I know, there are people from other markets here in this online webinar. I want to make sure to say that this feature should be implemented in any kind of product or service, like any app that is directly to the teenager or children, or that could be accessible to them. So any type, could be financial payment, could be any other type of education, is not only social media and games. And this is super important because in the end is a broad options that you have to provide to the parents and guardians here, because in the end they can manage time online, they can enable or disable some features like communication, transactions, purchase, and they have the entire control in the account of the children and teenagers. For sure, sometimes the law use the word according to the autonomy of the user. So from the age to age, parents should give more freedom, right, to the teenagers. But in the end, is a call of the parents and guardians to have access to all these tools for controlling the access, download, purchase, transactions, communications. Is a lot of tools they will have access in each app, for instance.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is definitely an area where some standardization of what tools are available to parents. I think we're going to see that emerge over the coming months. Before we go into a little bit more of the practicalities of how we deal with this, I do think we should take maybe a few more questions, and then
Yeah.
so yeah, I'm keeping tabs of them on my phone. So I think where we got to last was, if you're in the UK and already have age verification in place that conforms to the Online Safety Act, would that implementation also conform to new laws in Brazil? We don't know for sure because there's always more regulation, but generally speaking, I would say you're in pretty good shape, right? Because the Brazilian regulators, they're looking at Ofcom for guidance, they're looking at how these things are being rolled out. As long as you're still following the sort of proportionality principles. And again, I think the methods of age verification and age assurance in the UK have a fair amount of parity with what the ANPD is envisioning.
The next question, I'm not sure if you understood. If under 16, would a digital photo ID should child school and verified by facial match be okay rather than parental consent?
So, I mean, a digital photo ID verified by a biometric match, if they were over 8, like that could be used to show that you're an adult and therefore don't need parental consent. But if you're saying that I'm under 16, then the point is you do need parental consent. So yeah,
yeah, you need for social media, right? You need your account attached to the account of your parents, right?
Yep.
This limit of 16 years old, just to make sure that everyone understands the age. This limited of 16 years old is to have the account on a social media attached to the parents or guardian's account. But in the end, the rule for age verification is 18 years old, right? When you have content for adult, then you have the age verification. So it's 18 years old, okay? Only for social media, you have this difference between 16 years old.
Yep, absolutely. And then last question, then I think we should keep going, is that how are we supposed to determine who's a parent of whom? And Larissa, you actually kind of covered this a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, in COPPA in the US and in the EU, we haven't seen a regulatory requirement that we actually prove the parental guardian relationship between child and adult. Again, because like this question is implying, that does require a lot more personal information collection that probably wouldn't be proportional in most cases. It is something that, you know, potentially with a digital ID or a government ID, you could infer, but it wouldn't be required in every scenario to actually prove that familial connection. If somebody who is clearly an adult says this is my kid, um, you know, generally the law says okay. Um, okay, so let's move on a little bit to just talk about a little how we solve this and what we do, and we'll definitely get back to these questions. Um, Again, I think it's important for us to mention and without be salesy that this is something that KID was designed to build and to solve for. And you know, Larissa and you know, this is what we do. This is how we solve. The three things that we do in order to comply with these regulations is we provide age assurance. And we provide the compliance development kit. It's a sort of an SDK, but for compliance. And then we have a parent portal and you know, tools for parents. On the age assurance side, KID offers, we act as sort of a clearinghouse that offers a variety of different age assurance methods provided by a number of different vendors. You know, Veritad privately, Stripe, Verify My, a bunch of them, Connect ID in Australia. Again, our goal is to sort of offer a whole bunch of different age assurance methods, depending on what are the sort of applicable and acceptable methods in each country. Um, and we're live already with a bunch of clients like Discord and Twitch and Quora on the age assurance side. We did get a question about cryptographic age tokens. I can't say too much about it other than please watch this space over the next couple of weeks. We're very excited about age, you know, reusable age signals for the whole industry. Essentially, what these tokens are is very similar to the passkey technology that exists on your, you know, phone or your computer, where it's locked behind your device's security layer, so like your thumbprint or your face scan. Um, but again, these can be reusable and they can be signals that will help make the age assurance process less frictiony and less burdensome. On the CDK, again, I'll kind of run through this. So KID was basically founded by a bunch of lawyers who were just trying to keep track of all of these legislative and regulatory requirements. And so it's a massive database of over 10,000 different rules and regulations in 200 jurisdictions that is just tracking what the law is and what is the age of a child and what are the threshold ages at which certain things have to be turned on or off or get parental consent. And so the idea here is to be able to, through a very simple API interface, you tell us, hey, this is a 12-year-old in Brazil, or this is a 15-year-old in Peru, or an 18-year-old in UK, and all of those people get different experiences, and it's all done automatically and updated monthly as a live service. And you know, we've got that live with, you know, companies like Another Axiom, Wizards of the Coast, Supercell, a few others that we can't announce yet. But again, this is very something that we're moving forward with very quickly. And then finally, parental tools and our parent portal. Again, we have a consumer-facing website that parents can go in, approve features for their child, set these sorts of controls, spending controls. It's all triggered based off of the CDK and what, you know, applicable are in each jurisdiction, and includes sort of data subject access requests and things like that. Again, just designed to provide all of these things that the law requires. I will pause there, and then I think maybe Larissa, I think you wanted to go over this checklist of, other things that we can
Yeah,
help
I'll get one question and then I will go to checklist because there is a
Sure.
very interesting question here. That is,
Hmm.
in our app is specific designs for children and implementing full range of age appropriate designs and reduce risks for children. Is the age assurance process still mandatory? So this is a really good question because we are discussing that there is nothing in the law that provides an obligation for each app to have this age verification. It's just the obligations that I said, that is first for the app stores to provide signals, and then for the apps to obtain or implement technology to receive the age signals from the app stores and the operating systems. So this is obligation to receive the signals. But if you are not social media or you do not have content for adults there, then you can rely on that. However, you have to know for sure that you could be responsible in order to if you suddenly provide something that is not directly to children. However, that said, you have to be sure that you do not have any other type of features that should be controlled. So communication inside the platform or transactions, purchase. And one specific thing is, although you are designed to be direct to children and adolescents, you need the parental supervision tool there. So this is an obligation that will apply to all the platforms. So in this respect, we'll have to implement this center for parental supervision, okay? Because one of the obligations is not only for communication, transaction, but also for time control in the platform. So then going to checklists. So in the end, you have to review your onboarding flow in order to see whenever you have to implement age verification, when you can rely on the app stores age verification. So then you have to implement this API to receive the signal from the app stores, appoint a local representative in Brazil. You have also, because there are other obligations that we haven't discussed in details, but there are other obligations in the law. So you have to implement a specific channel for claims and notifications about inappropriate or improper content to children and teenager, or about children and teenager. You have to implement the parental tools for supervision here, and sometimes the consent. Loot box, again, they are not allowed if they are paid in order to be directed to children and teenagers. So we have to review the options there in order to be in compliance. And continues here, there is a long list, but we tried to summarize. And also there are some obligations of takedown of content. You have to implement these in the platform. If you receive a notice, you have to take down, and also content moderation, inclusive for the games. You have to review your communication tools when you allowed communications inside the platforms. Remember that when it's adult that is communicating with the other users, you need to tag that in his profile or her profile. Then in general, we say review your strategy ads, because there is a ban here on the profiling. Content monetization, you cannot allow monetization of any content that explore children and teenagers in the platform, like sexual exploration, things like that. So you have to adopt content moderation policies, review your policy, internal policies, and also there is specific obligation that if there is a content in violation of kids' rights, you have to take down the content, but also you have to communicate authorities in Brazil and also internationally. And I think last to say that you have to adopt a setting in order to prevent the compulsive use of products to children and adolescents. So, I mean, it's a pretty new regulation. We are going to see a lot of discussion on that. For who wants more information, for sure, Joy and I, we are always available. But in addition to that, there are webinars of the Data Protection Authority in the YouTube. This is specific guidance of the Data Protection Authority on age verification, and whatever you need, for sure, you can reach out to us. Do you have time for more questions, Joey?
I think so. I think, well, before we get, I know we have a bunch of Q&A, so please add them. I know Olaf wanted to say a few words, and then I think we'll give the last couple minutes to Q&A.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first and foremost, thanks everybody for attending. We will hand it back for Q&A and try to answer, or we will answer all your questions. But for those of you that will have to drop off, please take note of the following two things. You can scan them with your QR code. So the first one is a very useful guide we've written about solving youth compliance in Brazil. So it highlights a lot of things that we've been talking about today. It's got a lot of practical tips. Please read that. And the other one is our Age Kit, which is basically your complementary universal age IPA. And you can basically go on the website, then you select referred by other, and then if you enter Age Kit Brazil, you'll get your free complementary API. On top of that, another important question that has been asked is has this been recorded? Yes, it has been. So everybody that attended today, first and foremost, once again, thank you very much. You will also receive an email that contains both of the links that are on the screen right now, as well as some other useful information. So we'll be in contact with that. And with that, I'll hand it back to Joe and Larissa to answer the remaining questions.
Yeah, we'll do our best with the time we have. Thank you everyone again for so many wonderful questions. This is it's amazing to get so much interest and feedback on this. I'm gonna just kind of pick and choose. I don't know if we necessarily have to go in order, Larissa, but I'll just say, so there was a question about transparent loot box. Is that if you include odds disclosures? No. This is for a loot box to be transparent, there has to not be that element of surprise. Like you need to know exactly what is going to be in the loot box before you buy it for it to not be a loot box. Just saying that you have a 20% chance of getting something, there's still that's still that element of chance, and so it would likely still be considered a loot box.
There was another question, Joey, here about what would be content not allowed to children and teenagers. So Article 6 of the law, there is a specific list of examples. So sexual exploration or abuse, physical assault, intimidation, or inducement or mental inducement of practice against law, harmful to physical, mental of children, like, you know, that cases of suicide, things like that. Promotion and marketing of gambling, fixed odd betting, predatory, unfair, deceptive advertising, pornographic content. So there are some examples that there are examples here in the law in Article 6, okay? So whatever you have this content that is not allowed to children and teenagers, then it will be you have to have the age verification for age access.
Yeah, makes sense. I see there's a question about VPNs. Can you just block Brazilian IP address and leave the Brazilian market entirely? I mean, we've seen some companies do that in. Sorry?
Do that.
Don't do it. Yeah, well, I mean, it's the third biggest market. You know, you're hundreds of millions of users that you'd be potentially blocking, and I don't know how many of them would use VPNs. But yeah, I mean, from a legal standpoint, we are seeing, you know, in light of all of this regulatory fragmentation, that some companies are pulling out of certain markets. Again, I don't think it's not necessary. It's not necessary. There are ways to comply. There are ways to do it. I mean, our view at KID is that we want to make compliance accessible to everybody, and you know, you shouldn't have to decide between complying with these laws and doing business entirely. You know, there are ways to get it done. I know we're over time a little bit, but we can maybe take a few more questions if that's okay with you.
I'll get one here. Is
Okay.
there any hints of how excessive use is interpreted under law? Actually not. This probably is going to be regulated, interpreting guidelines. We do not have this right now.
Yeah, it's an area where a lot of laws have been passed in the United States too about like addictive feeds and things like that. And we do see in the United States at least that there's a lot of pushback on that because it's vague and potentially, you know, interferes with free speech and all that stuff, which again isn't always the, you know, the calculus outside of the US, but it is a very gray area. Like what is excessive use and what is just kind of good app design that makes people want to engage with you. So I think we're probably a ways off from any sort of real enforcement or clear, bright line as to what is addictive and what isn't. But I know that the one practical piece of advice is that there's a specific of like the endless feed scroll, where, you know, it just keeps adding new stuff in your feed. I know that that's a specific thing that regulators have pointed as an example of, you know, encouraging excessive use. So again, definitely watch this space. There will probably be more guidance on it.
There is one specific question. I don't know if it is the last one, but I will get this one. That is in case of loot box, if with parent consent, it will be okay. No, this is forbidden by law. So you cannot provide loot box in the concept that I have mentioned to kids and teenagers.
Yeah, this is actually a difference between Brazil's approach and say like the United States approach. So when the FTC enforced against Genshin Impact, they said parental consent will be required to buy loot boxes, and Brazil is explicitly stricter, saying we don't care if the parent consents; it still has to be prohibited. Again, this is for, you know, sort of gambling protection, you know, reasons.
What can have the consent of the parents and guardians and then be allowed is the communication inside the games and apps.
Yep, absolutely. So do we need parental consent for data processing based on consent or regardless? So the LGPD still applies, and that still has general parental consent requirements that mirror the GDPRs in Europe. So to the extent that the game or the social media service of the app is processing personal information from minors, a parent's consent is still required from that. So again, in the KID flow, for example, you know, there's a direct notice that it presents to parents, this is the data that's going to be collected and processed in the service that your kid's about to use. You know, that's sort of presented as a notice, you know, it's something that they are, you know, agree to. And then they configure specific permissions for features or for spending limits or time controls or things like that. So it's kind of a multi-step process.
And in this new law, the law is very specific about the protection of privacy and data of children and teenagers in the platforms. And then you have as a default high standard of protection of safety and privacy and data protection. In Brazil, you can have legal basis other than consent in order to process data. However, once you decide that you are going to rely on consent, because you could rely on legitimate interest, for instance, or any other legal basis, depending on the purpose of use. But once you decide that you are going to rely on consent, then you have to get, if it's underage, you have to get the parents to represent or to assist the children or teenager. Because this is a little bit specific. I don't want to make confusion here, but this is civil law in Brazil, civil code in Brazil. So in order to provide consent and to be bound by a civil act, you have to be represented or assisted by your parents or guardians, depending on your age, okay?
Awesome. Okay. All right. I think now we probably do need to call it. It's 6 minutes over. But again, I just wanted to thank you again, Larissa. Thank you so much for participating on this. Thank you to everyone who attended. You know, this is an amazing turnout, and it was obviously an area where there's more discussion that will certainly happen. And thank you again, Olav, and to the KID team for helping put together these presentations and this deck. Yeah, the conversation will absolutely continue.
Yeah, thank you. And whatever everyone needs here, you can reach out to us. And thank you for the attendance.
Fantastic. Have a good one.
We're not online.